Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost, and it's Friday. So you know what that means. It means it's the True Community Gathering. It's Friday, August 25th. And this, if I'm counting right, is the 169th consecutive Friday interview that I've been doing since April 17th, 2020. This started off as a community service to help us get through COVID, and it's grown and grown and grown. It's changed me, and it's changed True in many ways. We used to be we're an arts service organization that helps people understand the business of theater, and we have a particular focus on producers. And we used to be really New York centric. We used to have everything happen in New York live. And since COVID, I opened up a Zoom room, and all of a sudden we have people from all over the country, and we have people from Australia and UK here today. And it's been very exciting for me to realize that we can actually reach beyond New York and have a community that is a theater community that doesn't just exist here in New York. It exists everywhere. All of us who love theater and all of us who feel connected to theater can feel connected to each other by coming together every Friday at 5:30. We open the room at 5. We usually start a guest speaker at 5:30. So if you want to do that, and if you want to be part of us, don't let me stop you. You can actually just email me at trunltd@aol.com. That's trunltd@aol.com. And I will send you the link, and you can come and Zoom with us every week. Today, we've got a big turnout for us. It's a big turnout. We have like 42 people here, and they're not here to see me. They're here to see Austin Pendleton. I'm very honored and excited that Austin has become a friend and a supporter, and was willing to come on and talk to us about anything he wants, actually. But we talked about talking about his career, and we're focusing on. I have a couple areas of focus that I'm going to mention, and I'm bringing Austin in right now. So Austin, welcome to True. Welcome to the True Community Gathering. Just me and 42 of my closest friends.
Thank you.
There were many reasons why I wanted to meet you and have people meet you and interview. Actually, everybody in this room already has met you in some way, in one way or the other, it seems. So they've taken classes with you, they've been in shows with you, they've been involved in shows that you've been involved with. You are very beloved, and my guess is it's because it's one of you that you're one of the most supportive people I've met in theater in my how many years? I don't know how many years it's been. I guess it's 35 years or so that I've been in theater. You've helped people, you've supported people. Let's go back to your beginnings. You started off, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you started off as an actor. That was your original plan for life.
Yeah.
So how different was it back then when you first started acting to what the business is like now? What happened? What were you able to do then that might be harder to do now?
It was equally brutal. There's no other way of putting this. I owe my career to an incredible stroke of luck named Jerome Robbins. And I got there was this play called Oh Dad, Poor Dad. Mama's hung you in the closet and I'm feeling so sad, by Arthur Coppett.
Which I actually saw.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
With Joe Van Fleet and Barbara Harris and me?
I believe so. I was younger then.
Yeah. And that was a play I had read. That play had been produced I was an undergraduate in my senior year at Yale, and Arthur Coppett was an undergraduate in his senior year at Harvard, and he wrote this play that was done at Harvard by the Harvard, Dramat, and it was instantly became a cause célèbre, and it was even published before its first professional production. And I read it, Sam, I was in my senior year at Yale. I was down in New York on my spring vacation, and I was going back to New Haven, and something to read on the train, and Grand Central had a bookstore then. Now, all these things I say, if this had not been true, we wouldn't be talking here today. So I bought it and I read it, and the character had a stutter. The three leads are the mother, her son, and a girl that the boy falls in love with. And I thought, and I had a stutter, and I thought, I don't want to play a part of a stutter. I went into acting to get out of that. So I thought, and I tried to get an audition for it, and I couldn't. And finally, a friend of mine was talking to her agent, and they were gossiping. And this agent, by the name of Deborah Coleman, a wonderful woman who very important in my life, said, you know, I hear Jerry Robbins can't find that boy. And my friend said, well, I know somebody who can do it. And so I got an audition for it. And I decided I'm going to read it fluently. I'm not going to go near the stuttering. So I read it totally fluently, and Jerry Robbins came up on the stage after it. It was at the end of a long afternoon. He'd been doing a auditioning. And he was very impressed with the audition. And then he said, do you stutter? And I said, yeah, but I act a lot and all that. And I wondered how he knew that. And I sort of put that in the back of my mind. And then ultimately he auditioned me quite a number of times. And then what finally sold it was he had me come in and audition with Barbara Harris. And that day we both got the job because there was a chemistry that he needed. So we did that. And then about a month into, and he kept saying in the rehearsals, you have to stutter more. And I would say, I will, but I wasn't going to go near it. About 3 or 4 weeks, one Friday night after we opened, I got an attack of it. I can only call it that. And I got so upset by it that I thought I've got to leave the show. And the stage manager said to me, go stop at Jerry's house, which was only a couple blocks away from the theater. And in fact, it's only 2 blocks south of where I'm talking to you right now. And so Jerry said, I can't stop you from leaving. It's off-Broadway contract. You have a 2-week out, but I don't want you to leave it. I want you to confront this. And I said, but I don't think you realize how it's begun to get very bad just in the past few nights. He said, oh, I know. We have a thing called a performance report. It's the first time I ever heard of a performance report. And I thought, well, then he said, no, I want you to stay in this and confront this, because if you back out of, now here comes the kicker. If you withdraw from this show, you probably will never act again. You'll be too frightened to do it. And word will get out in the industry why you quit. And then that'll be that. And quote, I want you to act for the rest of your life. Jerome Robbins, 1962. And
it seems like you took that advice.
yeah, and so then it much improved after that conversation, but then there would be relapses. And so in the cast, it was a large cast. There were a lot of bellboys and people, including one of them was a brilliant actor by the name of Barry Primus, who was in it, and who has gone on to a remarkable career. He said, and I said, Barry, I've got to leave the show. I mean, Jerry doesn't want me to, but what can I do? And Barry gave me subway directions to HB Studio and said, you follow these, you go on these trains, and then you walk here and walk there, and you audition for Uta Hagen. That changed my life, because I now teach at the studio she and her husband started.
So,
and I got through the year, and I would get in control of it and lose control. And it was a very hard and painful year, even with those 2 magnificent actresses I was working with. And finally, they had to fire me.
they fired you?
Yeah, it got so out of control that they had to fire me, and I was so relieved. And of course, I had 2 weeks after the firing, and of course, in those 2 weeks, I blossomed and said, no, 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 let me stay. And the producer said, no, it'll just get worse again. He was very kind, but so then the final night was a Sunday night. It was when Off-Broadway had that kind of schedule. And all my friends came and we congregated in the bar just up on Second Avenue, a bar that's long gone. And we celebrated the fact that I'd given my last performance in it. And I was so happy to be out of it. But then I thought, Jerry Robbins will never hire me again. 8 months or 8 months later, he got me to audition for what became Fiddler on the Roof. And he said, and he ran backstage after my audition and said, he said, I don't hear the stuttering anymore. That's a fantastic accomplishment. And I thought, well, it's still there a little bit. But so then we went into rehearsal and I was still a little bit there. And he said to me one day, well, I see it's a little bit still there. And he kind of laughed. And I said, yeah, I lied to you. And he said, well, don't worry about it. It's way less severe than it was. It can even work for the part. Don't worry about it. But then he said hilariously, if you do get in a block, though, try to work through it quickly because the show is 3.5 hours long. And I thought that was so funny. And then I played my big scene opposite Zero Mostel in the play. And Zero, of course, was a total anarchist. And Zero would make capital on stage of the fact of this comparatively small amount of stuttering I was doing. And people were so offended that he was doing that. And I said, no, I love it. He's taking all the seriousness out of it. I love it. And I always credit Zero Mostel with it being like the actor who set me free.
Well, that's an auspicious start
Yeah,
in
and
theater.
then I would just, so I will wrap this up. So years went by and Jerry and I were friends all those years. And he would come to see almost every play I was in, including the showcases. And then he would comment how the stutter's almost gone. Now it's all gone and all that. After he died, there's a biography came out, a biography of him by a woman named Amanda Vale. And she interviewed me for it. So she sent me an advance copy. I was reading it one night and read in the early years of Jerry Robbins that he stuttered. So that's the story.
So he understood.
So in effect, and that's why he was so supportive of me. So I owe my acting career to the fact that I stuttered. I mean, this makes no sense.
And it's also not necessarily anything other people can actually do.
Yeah.
Oh, I know how I'm going to get ahead in the business. I'm going to start stuttering.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's such a paradox. And all my life, all the 60 plus years of my life in this production is built on that paradox.
Well, let me ask you something. Let me get to some broader questions. What was the transition like going from theater to film? How did you get your start in film? One of the things I want to explore today is basically
a film called Skidoo, Otto Preminger.
Okay.
A guy had written a part for me in the screenplay called Skidoo, and then it was picked up by Otto Preminger. And so, of course, I had to meet with Otto Preminger. And we met in San Francisco. He was, I was going to meet outside his hotel, and then he was going to have his chauffeur take us to the set, and I was going to do a screen test, and then they would put me on the overnight plane so I could go home to New York. So we talked politics all the way out in the car, out to where the film was being shot. I met him outside his hotel. We talked politics. It was that incredible spring of 1968 where everything was upside down. And we talked politics all the way. And we arrived there at the set. And Otto said to the driver, take Mr. Pendleton to the airport. I said, well, what about my screen test? He said, I enjoyed our conversation about politics. You have the part.
You are very blessed in so many ways.
Yes.
I call today's conversation balancing act because one of the things I wanted to do was talk about the contrasts between Hollywood and New York, and also talk about the contrasts between acting in film and acting in theater, and also your transition into directing. So all of these things that you balanced in your career, very impressive and a little bit overwhelming to many of us that think that you can do as much as you do so well. So let's start with a little bit of an idea. Your path to film seems like, again, it's so unique and it's so special to you. It's not anything that somebody in the room who wants to get into film could necessarily do. They can't get into the car with Otto Preminger. They can't actually have a screenplay that's written with a part for them. But what other things can people know about your journey as an artist when you were younger?
Well, ask me the questions you were just asking them one by one, okay?
Hey, let's start. What were the differences that you found in between working in New York and working in LA, or in theater and film? And
none, no difference. It's the same process.
So you're acting for film. Acting is acting. There are classes in acting for film that talk about differences. You didn't feel that there were any differences?
No, I've never experienced it being any different. I mean, the circumstances are different. There's no audience when you're making a film, and there's a camera there and all that, and you do take after take and all that. But the actual process of the acting is pretty much identical. Well, I directed, Elizabeth Taylor in the first time she was ever in a play, because she had been a child star in the movies. And she said to me, now, what do I need to learn about stage acting? I said, nothing.
All right.
Yeah, it's the same process.
When we watch auditions, and we've done audition events for many years, and we see people play very small in an audition. A lot of us in the room go, "Oh, film actor." My experience has been that it's been smaller, and it's been smaller and softer. And when you are on stage, you project things a little bit more broadly.
Well, yeah, you talk louder. That's all there is to it.
All right, I'm not going to get to anything deep here.
No. I'm not trying to evade you. There's I said to Elizabeth, just talk a little bit louder. It helped, of course, that some of her best work on film had been adaptations from plays, like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf or Summer. Yeah. And therefore she was familiar with elevated stage language. I mean, that would be one difference. But a lot of films have elevated language, and a lot of stage plays do not have elevated language. So even there's not that much. It's the same process. You talk and you listen, and you pursue an objective that whatever the character wants, and you encounter the obstacles that the character encounters in the script. And it's when you get it all down to the bare bones, it's the same thing.
Okay. I think I told you that when you were doing Little Foxes, I was part of a group that was honoring Elizabeth Taylor at the Milford Plaza. I don't know if you remember that, which we honored her. We gave her the Amuna Women of the Year award.
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
So that was me.
Yeah.
So let's follow the journey a little bit further. At what point did you become interested in directing?
Well, I'm trying to make this quick. I hadn't really.
No need to.
Me and my friends had a group when we were in junior high school and high school in the basement of my parents' house. Me and my friends, including my younger brother, we would put on plays. Yeah. And sometimes I would direct them, and sometimes I would direct them and be in them. And sometimes other ones of us would direct them. And so it just kind of, and all that happened because it was a dirty job, but somebody had to do it, you know. And so, and also I grew up in a theater household. My mother had been a professional actress and director before she married my father. And then when they started the adult community theater in our town in Warren, Ohio, she directed there a lot and she acted there a lot. And so I grew up watching her do that. And even being in productions that she had directed. And so then all the directors that I worked with in the business followed the same basic principles that she had. She had been trained, and it was so it just kind of slid into it. But it was a lot of it was where I grew up and that group that me and my friends had.
Look, let me ask you this as an artist. What is it? What is the satisfaction that you get from acting, and how does it differ from the satisfaction that you get as a director? How do you approach the two different crafts?
It's hard to say. When you're acting, you say your lines and you listen to the other person's lines, and when you're directing, you watch the whole thing.
You have a brilliant way of simplifying everything.
Well, except it is that simple.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a challenge in that each of the two assignments or functions, however you want to put it, the requirements are so clearly laid out. There's no other way you can do either one of those things than to just to do what it says. You direct, you sit and watch, you stand up, you say, maybe change this, maybe change that.
But the truth of the matter is, Austin, that some people who act do not take to directing very easily, and some people who direct do not act. I mean,
it's probably because I grew up in an atmosphere brought up by a mother who did both. And therefore that influenced the little group that me and my friends had, because we were very influenced by the community, the adult community theater that was going on.
So when you were just starting out as an actor, you already had it in your mind that if it happened, you would probably wind up directing as well. So directing was equally.
It wasn't that much of a plan. I started out as an actor, and then here's what happened. I was for the second half of the run of Odette, I was also in a thing called the Lincoln Center training program. At that time, Elia Kazan was the following year going to start the Lincoln Center Company, which is going to be this great big deal. And in the season before then, September to May, they picked a whole lot of people auditioned for it, and they picked 30 of us, and I was in Odette at the time. And the acting teacher was Robert Lewis. And so we would do scenes, and we were told, the 30 of us, at the end of the 8 months in May, half of us would be picked for the company and half would not. That freaked out a lot of the actors. Am I going to be picked or not? I really didn't care. I was getting 8 months, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day of free training from some of the top people in the business. I didn't care whether I got in the company or not. So I had a more relaxed time of it. One day I did a scene from Hamlet, from Hamlet that Bobby Lewis had assigned to me and to this actress. And there was something, and it started with the to be or not to be speech. And there's something I did at the beginning of that. I ran up to the throne and stabbed it as if Claudius was in it. And Bobby said, why did you do that? He said, I like that. Why did you do that? I said, oh, just an instinct I had. He said, that's a directorial idea. You should direct as well as act. And so then he told that to Nikos Sakaropoulos, who would run the Williamstown Summer Theater, and I had been an apprentice, and that was me. And so Nico started hiring me as a director. That's the whole story.
No, but at least it's something specific and concrete. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of times when I do these, well, not a lot, almost all the time when I do these kind of conversations, what I'm looking for is information that will be inspiring or useful for the people that are watching us.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find points where people can go, oh, that could happen to me.
Well, see, what I'm trying to say here, I never had a plan. I think that in this line of work, well, except keep your eyes open, watch what people are doing. And also I had the advantage that I was raised in it. I was raised, then that could be the first few productions of that community theater in the evenings. They always rehearsed in the evenings in community theater. Some of the rehearsals were conducted in our living room. After I was supposed to be in bed, and I would sneak down and hide and what. And I watched people like my mother or other people directing these actors. And I would be like 8 years old or something. And it was such a clear process, because it was a pretty sophisticated community theater. I mean, the actors were really good, and there were other directors too, some of whom my mother had trained as directors, and they knew what they were doing. And it just got so absorbing to watch. And it wasn't a different process really than Jerome Robbins or the other great directors I've worked with, like Mike Nichols and Alan Arkin and Nikos Sakharopoulos, and at Williamstown, and so it was like the training was never formalized. It was just hanging out and watching.
I know that there's somebody in our room who has had a similar background to yours, because she had two. Whoops, somebody's coming on our screen again. She was the daughter of two famous actors, and I've heard similar stories from her as well. I think she's probably thoroughly enjoying listening to this from you.
It's the best training in the world.
Well,
But even if your parents are not into it, there's so much. If you can find a way to hang out and watch and even assist or whatever, you learn volumes. And what you learn is that every time out, it's different. There's not a set of rules. If you're an actor, every director you're going to work with is different. And like Uta Hagen, who was, I say, was one of my teachers, people would come and they'd be in rehearsal with a different, with the director. They would come and say, the director is making me work in a whole other way than what you've taught me how to act. And Uta would say, do what the director says.
Yeah.
I'm just giving you a blueprint, but you have to adapt it. Don't say, oh, that's not my process.
Yeah.
No director is interested in hearing that sentence.
Talking about going back to the whole idea of balancing, because you balance so many different things in your career. I don't think you even think about it. I probably am thinking about it way more than you are. But you also have written plays.
Yeah.
How do you know what choices to make at any moment in your career? It's if you direct, you write, you act. You just wait for the opportunities.
It's sort of formed by what comes at you.
I was going to say, you just wait for the
Now I'm
opportunities.
going to devote the next few months to write. Or acting, or it's like it's all about which way the wind is blowing.
So you just follow the path that as it unfolds.
Yeah, there's literally, this business doesn't allow you to do anything else. This business does not allow you structure.
Well, on the other hand, if we're in a business where there aren't opportunities to act, you can actually step away and say, okay, I'm going to look for opportunities to direct, or you
It's not that logical. Sometimes you just wait and see what's coming down the pike. You don't look for things. That's never worked for me, and it's also never worked for a lot of people I know. It's like you have no control over it.
right.
Now, some people start acting companies so that they control it, and sometimes that works for a little while, but then all that dissolves. People go their different ways.
Have there ever been any fallow times during your career? It sounds like you've always been active.
Well, yeah. Well, see, I had my adversities at some point in the early half of my career and so forth. And I got I got very good advice from that marvelous actress named Lynn Redgrave. She said, I was in a period in my career when I was getting horrible reviews and it all looked like it was over. And she said, don't think that way. Just find out about some showcase somebody's doing. And go and ask if you can be in it, and they'll probably want to take you because you've had some experience. So I would start acting in attics and church lofts and parts of all different kinds and size and everything like that. And that kind of got me through all the different periods when I would be, how should we say in the profession, out of favor.
Oh,
or
in movies they call it box office poison.
Yeah, right. But what it really isn't box office poison, it's industry poison.
Yeah.
It's the industry decides you're a poisonous substance. So you just go and do it somewhere else.
So
it's all about what comes up. It's impossible to control it.
Well, let me say this. You had early success, and I think you were a known quantity from a very from a very early age. There may be people in the room who feel like they would love to follow the path and take the opportunities as they come up, but there are people who also feel like they need to make their own opportunities because they're not being sought. You were sought after at times. You were avoided at times, admittedly, but you were sought after at times. So what would you tell them?
Well,
people that don't see opportunities falling into the laps. Is it that they're not noticing?
I went through a period where a major professional relationship that with Mr. Robbins fell into my lap. Now that's just plain luck.
Right.
And then I would go through periods of very bad luck. And I would go through extended periods of you'll never work again in this business. However, those periods occurred in the context of a professional life that was already established. So what you're talking about is how do you get started?
Well, I am talking about that, but also what you said is extremely relevant because now I think people in the room are probably identifying with, instead of thinking, oh, if only that could happen to me. Now they're seeing that a lot of the things that they go through are the same things that you have gone through. You've gone through periods where you were frustrated and you were not getting artistic
I would
satisfaction.
walk, in the bad years, I would, there would be some part I was interested in, and I would call up the casting director. And because I was directing by then, I knew a lot of casting directors. And I would say, I'd like to audition for this. And my agent can't get an audition for me. Nobody wants to see me. And the casting director, it was usually a woman, would start to tap dance and say, oh, this and that. I said, look, I know it's hard for you. I really don't know. You're in a position where no one wants to see me. But if you could just, and then they would say, you're right, this is wrong. And they would get me an audition. Then I would walk into the room and the temperature would drop by 30 degrees. And a couple of times the director would go so far as to say to everyone else in the room, what is he doing here?
Audibly enough for you to hear.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was, I was meant to hear it. And then, this went on at some point or another for years. And in a way, my career never quite has recovered from all that. I mean, I've had some good little, flourishes, but it's, and also my cousin Vinny practically ended my career.
Why? How?
Because then after that, people would say that's the first honest performance you've ever given because you have a stutter and you're playing a stutter, which is bullshit. I've been acting non-stuttering parts for years. And my agent would say, dear, the only ones they're calling me up about for any movies of yours are stuttering parts. I said, I'm not doing them. I only did my cousin Vinny because the director was a good friend of mine. I was very reluctant to do it for exactly that reason. So finally, no director would even see me after my cousin Vinny came out. So then the same director, Jonathan Lynn, a good friend of mine, he put me in 3 movies in a row because he was aware of what was going on. And they were all good films, that they didn't become the smash hit that my cousin Vinny was, but they were good movie. And Barbara Streisand, she gave me another movie. And Whoopi Goldberg was a friend of mine, and she got me in. So I got by for a few years with the help of my friends, as the song goes. But then after that, all that began to dry up. And with one exception, I've never made a major movie since. All that was washed away, except for the little exceptions I just mentioned, by my cousin Vinny. I should never have done that part.
I had no idea.
And I didn't want to do it. But if he hadn't been such a good friend of mine, and of course it's a brilliant movie, it's a classic, it's a wonderful movie, but all his movies are wonderful. And but it except for that little help I got from my friends, it ended my film career.
Okay, that's a big statement. Wow.
Well, it's the truth.
I never realized that. I just think if
one
you
exception to that, after those little years when I got a little help from my friends, was an Oliver Stone movie. It was the Wall Street movie. It was Wall Street #2 or something like that.
Right. Also,
And
finding Nemo.
Well, come on, so the business is like that. People would say you're only of interest to us now that you've done My Cousin Vinny. The only thing about you that interests us is that you can stutter, because you once had a stutter, so you know how to do it. They would say this out loud.
Well,
So
hopefully we all find our ways to nicer areas, nicer places, and nicer environments.
So the way to get to those nicer places is you don't want me here, I'll go over there.
Right.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Go out, I'll do summer stock, like happily that time, I could go to Williamstown.
Well, I guess basically it boils down to some
theater, or I'll make a little indie film or whatever, and I can teach. And once in a while, I get a little Broadway show like Minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Choir Boy.
And Choir Boy, yeah.
And you get to direct something on Broadway, like between Riverside and Crazy.
Yeah, which had already directed off Broadway.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny for the rest of us out here looking at you, we all think, wow, this is a legend. This is really a legend. And to hear about your vulnerabilities and your struggles is actually kind of healing for a lot of people.
Well, but if you actually look at it, every actor and director who has kept working over their life, it's the same thing. They hit rock bottom 2 or 3 times at least, and they just find their way back. They just stay open. And
there's the lesson for people to learn who are watching this, is basically keep going, just keep going.
the business wants to tell you that you're down and out. It actually has an interest in telling you that. And sometimes they will say it to you explicitly. And you say, oh, I understand, and then you behave otherwise.
It takes a certain amount of strength and a certain amount of inner strength to really get through all this. And I applaud you for. My impression of you is that you work all the time.
I do work all the time, but it's literally because I'll go anywhere. People say to me, "Oh, I would never do a showcase." I go, "Well, then you're gonna have a lot of idle time."
Yes, exactly. Well, it also is. It has a benefit for the community, Austin, what you're doing, because for you to be part of a community that hasn't achieved what you've achieved is very ennobling and very heartening for them. So when you appear in a show or direct a play by an unknown, it's an incredible gesture of generosity. And I know that there's a
I
lot
don't
of.
think of it that way. I think of it as a job.
You don't need to, but trust me.
No, but that I'm trying to make a point here. It's not generosity. I mean, it's not ungenerous, but the generosity isn't the impulse. The impulse is, oh, here's something I can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I'm really trying to say, and I've used the phrase before in this conversation, just keep your eyes open, keep your ears open. Oh, they need somebody over in that attic to do this. Okay, I'll go over there.
So you do take steps that generate opportunities. Opportunities don't just fall in your lap. Early on, the opportunities that sound like fell in your lap.
They fell in my lap for the first couple of years.
Yeah, and now it seems like you've become strong enough from early successes and from the ongoing moments of success that you've had that you can keep going.
What you get strong from even more are the failures.
Okay.
Where you are ordered to get out. You are told it's over. They are saying, like I quoted that one director, what's he doing here? You are explicitly said, forget it now.
I got to tell you, I'm not hearing all the things I expected to hear, but the things I am hearing are inspiring. And it's wonderful for so many of us, because we've all gone through checkered careers where one day something wonderful is happening and the next day you're just going, why am I in this business? So it's good to hear that from you. It's empowering.
You know that song by Stephen Sondheim called "I'm Still Here" from Follies?
Oh yes, backwards and forwards.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. I want to open it up to the room. You've touched my heart in many ways, and I appreciate all that you've said. I want to. And have there been any comments or questions along the way? I see Tracy Rosenberg has a hand up. I reward the virtual hand raise. I will reward the virtual hand raise by saying, Tracy, please ask your question or your comment.
Super. Thank you, Austin. This has been great. I'm in Edinburgh where it's very late and the Fringe is just coming to its final weekend. And I just learned that you brought Uncle Bob here in 1997. And I just wondered if you had any stories or memories of that you felt like sharing.
Yeah, well, Uncle Bob has always been, Uncle Bob is still the most produced play that I ever wrote.
Not Orson's Shadow.
No, well, first of all, Uncle Bob has only 2 characters, which makes it very portable. But also, Orson's Shadow, you have to have actors who can convincingly play Orson Welles and Laurence Olivier and Vivian Leigh, and there are a lot more actors who can do that than you think. I've seen a lot of productions of Orson's Shadow, and a lot of people are able to do that. But Uncle Bob is, like you pack light. I mean, it's just you need 2 actors. The parts can be played in any number of different ways. I've seen all kinds of productions of it. And it always, and one of the reasons people are drawn to doing it is it always stirs up a lot of trouble. It always, the community gets mad, but then it has real adherents. It has real people who pull for it and believe it.
Well, I think Tracy was curious about what your experience was in Edinburgh. Do you remember Edinburgh?
I can't remember, except that again, it was controversial. Some people are appalled by it. I don't quite understand why, but I mean, but that's their right. And in a way, the fact that they're appalled by it is a kind of a compliment. It means it affects them in some way.
Yes.
And then other people, they just are crazy about it. And it's a play I wrote for the actor who originally played it, George Morfogen. I felt
he's
to
wonderful.
write a play for him, and I was walking across Central Park one day at the height of the horrors of the AIDS epidemic. And I said to myself, just asking a kind of a real life question, I wonder if there's an occasion where a caretaker for an AIDS patient, and this is before any kind of cure had been found, if the caretaker of an AIDS patient feels so guilty that he contracts AIDS in order to give sexual comfort to the dying AIDS patient. I had that thought. And then about 2 minutes later, as I continued to walk through Sheep's Meadow, I thought, wait, that's a play. And I wrote it in 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I didn't immediately write it in 3 weeks, but I thought, who would the two people be? And then I landed, for reasons I will never totally figure out, an uncle and a nephew. I kept thinking they should be related. And the other combination seemed so cliched, like a caretaker and and all that kind of thing. So, and then when I was making that movie with Shirley MacLaine down in Baltimore, and I was playing her chauffeur, and there were days when they wanted us to do drive-by shots where I'd drive past the camera with her in the back seat. But they didn't know if the weather was going to be right. So I'd be up in the hotel room in Baltimore. I would just spend all day writing that script. And so it happened that way. I think it happened, and I think it turned out well. But even people who hate it grant that it's clear. You know what I mean? And I think part of the reason it did turn out well was it was written so quickly.
Yeah, sometimes our first impulses are the best ones.
Yeah, and I had free time imposed on me. I had to stay in the hotel room in case they suddenly needed me to drive by in the car. And I would write all day. And then at 11 o'clock at night, on the top floor of the hotel was a bar, and everybody working on the film would hang out in that bar. So I would write in the afternoon, I would write in the evening, and then go up at 11 o'clock and I would drink with everybody else on the film. And it was kind of a wonderful time.
And I'm going to have you pull out any questions, but I reward the virtual hand raise. So Sherry Friedman and then Eric Rothman. Sherry Friedman.
Hi. This is such a wonderful conversation. I appreciate it. Austin, why don't you please write a screenplay about everything you're telling us? It would be brilliant. And the public doesn't know what actors go through. They don't know what casting directors say to them. Or you could do a one-man show where you tell all of the things that you've been telling us.
Well, what I am doing at the request of my agent is I'm writing a memoir, and I'm almost finished with it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I think you got some pre-orders here.
Yeah.
But I would love to see you in person telling your experiences and sharing yourself with us the way you are now.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I could do that. Yeah.
Eric Rothman.
What am I? Did I successfully answered the question that the nice lady asked about Uncle Bob. Was there anything I didn't address in her question?
Yeah, thank you very much. I always like hearing the backstory.
Absolutely, Tracy. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next
now-
up, Eric Rothman.
Oh, Eric, there you are, Eric. Yes.
Hi, Austin. So I've been taking classes off and on a la carte at HB for decades. How has it been changed? How has what's the teaching experience been and the philosophy of the studio? How has things changed since the time of Uta Hagen and
As
Herbert
far as I
Burkhoff to
can
now?
tell, it hasn't changed at all. I mean, Uta and Herbert were like the bedrock. And Uta, of course, published a couple of books, so one can always consult those. And I haven't found that it's changed that much.
To me, it seems to have changed a great deal.
In what way, Eric?
Well, at the time, it was very, very stage focused with a certain point of view, and it broadened out quite a bit. There was a time when there was more screenwriting and there was more
Oh,
film.
you're talking about the playwriting part of it. Yeah.
I'm talking about the whole atmosphere of the studio. Yeah.
Oh. I wasn't that aware of that. I was in my own little orbit, you know. And I was never encouraged to do anything else, which was fine with me. I'm still teaching. I had 3 great acting teachers, Uta Hagen, her husband Herbert Burkhoff, and Bobby Lewis, as I've mentioned. And 89% of what I teach is stuff I got from them. Because what I got from them is still the bedrock stuff. It's still one way or another, any approach to teaching acting or directing actors or acting hasn't really changed that much as far as at least in my own experience. When I work with people are working with the same principles that they have been all the time I've been working. It's not like the language has changed. So I haven't experienced what you've observed. So I can't really answer that question.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, the next one up is Lee Roscoe.
Hi, Austin. That was great. We have 6 degrees of separation. I was working in the kitchen that Jack Elber directed when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
And
That must-
Coppet was coming around because they were friends. But
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you if, am I still there?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, is there any counterculture, avant-garde theater anymore for people writing things like Coppet did that are way, way out there?
Well, that's a fascinating question. Actually, Odad wasn't that far away from the existing principles of playwriting of its time. It put things together in a kind of unusual way, but it was still a very fundamental plot that moved forward in a linear way. I mean, it was the 18,000th play ever written about the tensions between a mother and a son. And all, I mean, that's the origin of the tension in the play. And then it's expressed through his relationship with the girl. That basic set of relationship had been in plays since the ancient Greeks. And he did his own little twist on it. But now what the kind of thing, and now the avant-garde of that time with people, so he wasn't really avant-garde. I'm not saying that against him or anything, but he was.
Can I just say, I think the term in this case would be absurdist, because he basically was doing what Albee was doing at the same time, which was looking at the world through a extreme lens, a very distorted lens, I'd say. And it wasn't that far from what was being done in Europe. There were a lot of absurdism.
That's true. But it more than the European equivalent of it. Those plots, Albee's plots, and Arthur Coppet's plots were they were rooted in very traditional structures. I mean, conflict, direct conflict that developed dramatically. And the outer form of it was a little different. But I mean, Oh Dad, Poor Dad is finally fundamentally not that different from Long Day's Journey into Night or Look Homeward Angel or The Glass Menagerie. It's just the filter through which you see it is slightly different. But the basic conflicts and tensions are the same. Now, I don't really see how that's changed that much since then.
I think what I was asking is, are there any theaters that you know of, since you have such vast experience, that are like a Joe Chaikin or a Living Theater or a Theater of Berlin or
the Living Theater was
left?
an
I did
enormous.
have a play down there.
It was an enormous event. I mean, the Living Theater was the one really truly revolutionary moment that was
Right.
happening. And I wasn't a part of it, but I was aware of it, and I saw it. I mean, I witnessed it, and it was exceptional. And in all kinds of little ways, I think that's affected what has come since. But offhand, I can't think of anything that far out of the mainstream
Mhm.
that's happened since, or that has had that degree of impact that the Living Theater had.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, and are there other questions from the room that I've missed? I know that Tita had said that.
Yeah, we have a question from Tita. Which wind made you want to put acting and directing on hold to write the complex play about Orson Welles?
That was okay. In the spring of 1967 was the first big season of the American Conservatory Theater, of which the artistic director was Bill Ball. And he invited me out to be part of that season. And the plays were in rep then, like on Tuesday night, you would play one play, Wednesday afternoon, another play. And so they were all in the rep for the whole 6 or 7 months of that first season. One of the leading actors in that outfit was a young actor by the name of Rene Aubergenois. And he was a triumph. He was called the American Olivier. When he died just 3 or 4 years ago, in his obit, in as sophisticated a paper in the Times, all they talked about was the sitcom he got on. Because in addition to all this extraordinary stage work he did, he was in a number of those movies by Robert Altman, who of course was a revolutionary film director of that time. So he did all of that. All they talked about in the New York Times was the sitcom. And they said he occasionally acted in theater. He was called the American Olivier. I mean, that, you do a lot of swimming upstream in this business. That's what he should be primarily remembered for. That in the Altman movie should be what, So anyway, so I was out making one of those Jonathan Lynn movies, a wonderful one called Trial and Error with Michael Richards and Charlene Theroux and Rip Torn, a very underrated movie. And one day, Judith Aubergenois called me over to their house in Los Angeles and said to me to have breakfast. And over breakfast, she said, in 1960, Orson Welles directed Laurence Olivier in a production of Rhinoceros by Ionesco in London. And by the time the play opened, Orson was no longer the director. Would you write a play about this? And it was clear that she wanted Rene to play Olivier because he had been called all those years before the American Olivier, and she wanted to restore that people's way of perceiving him that way. And very justly. I mean, and so I said, at first I thought, well, I can't do that. How can I rate these people? I don't know. Then I began to come across books about either Welles or Olivier, and they would sort of fall into my lap almost literally. And I thought, well, I'm being called to write this. Also, I wanted to make it up with Orson, who had passed by this point. Because I was in Catch-22 with him, and he was impossible. He was just impossible. And I was angry at him. And I expressed that a couple of times in places where people had access to it. And then he died, and then I went back after I was making Catch-22, and I saw some of his films that I didn't know about, films other than Citizen Kane. And I thought, wait a minute, this man is a genius. He was not a one-film wonder like that. That's an extraordinary body. So I felt guilty that I had expressed these views about Orson. Then when Judith gave me this idea, I thought, well, I'll try to make it up to Orson, although he had passed. So that's what persuaded me to take the job. But it was the impulse she had from asking me to write it was she wanted her husband to play Olivier, to restore that way of perceiving him that had happened all those decades before. In the event, and then Alfred Molina, their friend and a friend of mine, the idea he would play Orson, and I had the idea of introducing Vivian Leigh into it, and Joan Plowright and the critic of that. And then I got a call from Steppenwolf, the theater out in Chicago I'm involved with, and they had done Uncle Bob there, and it had gone very well. And they said, we hear you have a new play. And I wasn't sure about this play. I'd written it, but it took me 3 years, Orson Shadow. And I wasn't sure about it. I showed it to Judith, and she didn't like it at all. So I thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with this thing. So they said, we hear you have a new play. Could we read it? I said, oh, it's a piece of shit, you know. They said, well, look, and the literary manager said, and I quote, do you realize the crap I read every week? Just send me your script. And then to my astonishment, they agreed to do it. And Renee was not available, and Alfred Molina was not available. And so the artistic director then, Arthur Levy, said to me, I want to introduce you to a director in Chicago by the name of David Cromer, of whom I'd never heard. And he read it and he liked it. And then he cast a bunch of unknown Chicago actors in it in Chicago. And Ben Brantley of the New York Times came out to see some shows in Chicago and singled this one out for a lot of praise. And so after several years, we finally got it on in New York. And Ben Brantley made a very observant observation about it, where this play should never be acted by actors the audience knows. It should be actors the audience, they don't know who the actors are. They have to be wonderful actors, clearly, but so that the audience feels, and it should all be done in a small theater, so the audience feels they're in a room with Laurence Olivier. They're not watching a well-known name play Laurence Olivier or and you know, and Renee could have fit into that way. I mean, he wasn't that big a star or anything. He should have been, but he wasn't. And then it all worked. Ben Brantley liked it, so our producer wanted it, but nobody would accept David Cromer as the director. And I thought, I'm not going to let it be done in New York unless Cromer directs it, because I knew he had a handle on it. I didn't want some new director to come in and ruin the whole thing. So finally, Tracy Letts saw to it that we could have it done off Broadway, and it ran for a year. So that's the whole evolution of Orson Shadow. It came in as, if you will, through the back door. And I only really wrote it in order to make things up with Orson, who had passed. And to write a portrait of him, I hoped would be sympathetic. See, these indirect reasons why things get written
Basically, it goes back to what you were saying earlier, which is basically keep listening and keep your eyes open, and notice the opportunities.
Yeah. Don't have any preconception. Let the
That's,
conception arise from whatever's happening.
I'm going to take one last question from June, because June's a pal of yours. So June Aspa. June, are you there?
Can't need
Oh.
you have to put my video on.
Oh, well, you can do it without your video, but let me
Oh,
let me see if
okay.
I can, let me ask
Oh,
you.
no, turn her video on. Yeah,
Well, I can't right now.
okay. All right.
Let me find it. Let me find it.
It's okay. So I can start asking. So, Austin, what's new? What's coming up? What movie? What play?
Two plays I'm going to be in, both of which by happy chance are going to be directed by Emily Mann.
Okay.
Who's an
Cool.
amazing talent and an amazing person. The first
Here I
one,
am.
the first one goes into rehearsal on Tuesday, and it will
Wow.
be in New Jersey at the George Street Playhouse. And it's a play called The Pianist, adapted from that film, The Pianist.
Oh.
It's a Holocaust story.
Oh wow.
And we go into rehearsal on Tuesday, and it'll be a daily commute to New Jersey. And then quite soon after that closes, about a week after that closes, we go into rehearsal again with Emily Mann directing production of the Signature Theater of the Tennessee Williams play, The Night of the Iguana. You know,
Oh, I know what part you're going to play.
So you're talking about the Signature Theater in New York?
yeah, over on 42nd Street.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're going to play the poet. Isn't he a
yeah,
poet? Yeah.
the old guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
So
that's my
when,
favorite Tennessee Williams play.
when
Interesting.
will that be? I'll come down from Maryland for it.
Well,
Up,
that
up,
will
June,
start
up.
playing. That will start playing, I think, a little bit after Thanksgiving, and then it has quite a long run,
Oh, good.
unless it's catastrophic. You never do know.
Iguana, no, it won't be catastrophic. It'll be controversial at worst.
Yeah, well, but my point is, you never know.
Yeah.
You never know. It might hit everybody wrong.
Oh,
There's no way of knowing.
well, I'll come anyway.
Yeah, come even if it, yeah. I
Absolutely.
think it has a good cast, and Emily's a great director, and it's a brilliant play. And it's a brilliant play that hasn't been seen here in quite a while. It's
Yeah.
not like Streetcar or Glass Menagerie, which is done annually, It's or Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, all of which are brilliant plays, But it's not done that often.
That's great.
I love
Okay.
that. I do love that play.
I do too.
So I'm going to do the thank you at this point and close up the podcast. Austin, if you can stay a little while longer, we can talk a little bit more. But I'm going to go into speaker view as is my wont, and thank everybody for being here today. Austin, amazing guest. I enjoy speaking with you so much. I enjoy hearing what you have to say, even though you surprised me. And everybody in the room, thank you for being here today. The people that are new to True, I hope you'll come back. People that are here every
Bob,
week.
you're a terrific interviewer.
Oh, well, thank you.
Some people are not.
Basically, I just dig into what what would interest me and what I think would
Well, you
interest
go
others.
with the flow.
Yeah.
And the flow originates in you in a more fluid way than people who say, well, it was like acting with Miss Piggy,
I could do that too.
Yeah, well, I mean,
but there's so much to talk about with you.
Yeah.
I'm interested in so much of what you've done and who you are. That and I think that I wasn't sure what the lessons were to be learned, but I was pretty sure there would be lessons to be learned from hearing you speak about your career. So you've definitely fulfilled that wish for me. So I appreciate it very much. Those of you in the community, thank you for being part of True. Thank you for coming here every week. Some of you, Some of you have been here as often as I have, which is 169 weeks. I appreciate it. I appreciate the support. I appreciate the interest. And I appreciate the engagement. Engagement, there's one of the words that we really value, or I really value. Thank you for being engaged. Thank you for being parts of the conversation, everyone. For you out there who are just discovering us in YouTube or on our podcast,
Yeah.
welcome to True. This is what we do. I have interesting people coming in every week. I'd love you to be in the room. You can email me at trunltd@aol.com, trunltd@aol.com, and I'll invite you, and you can be here and you can ask your questions and you can be part of it. This started off as a service that we offered during shutdown. We're no longer in shutdown, and it's still being offered as a service because I feel that it's important and meaningful to create a community. You don't have to pay, it's pay what you can. However, I do want to mention the fact that we will have more expenses going forward because we're going into the live performance and we have venues and expenses that we don't have here in Zoom land. So if you can support us, please go to trudonate.com, 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 and give what you can. You would absolutely can keep coming back here and come for free, or if you want to, you can give a donation when you come and visit us in the room. That's it. Next week, join us for Cheryl Davis and Leah Simone Bowen, who recently did a adaptation of Treemonisha by Scott Joplin. We're going to talk about Treemonisha. We're going to talk about how to stay relevant today while being respectful to the past when you adapt something like that. And hopefully it'll be an interesting and useful conversation for you all. Again, thank you very much. Okay, that's it.